I wrong for not giving up the house that I inherited? I, 29 female, was raised in a Christian household. With that came gender roles that were ingrained in me at a young age. My granddad, however, hated that my parents taught us this way, and as I got older, I did too. Because of this, I became very close with my grandparents instead of my own parents. I also have an older brother that my parents labeled the second king of the house. More info, my grandparents lived in a beautiful house that had no neighbors, many trees, and a garden. They paid off the house after years and was very special to them. My granddad also had problems with his back and a condition that would get worse until he couldn't go on anymore. After my grandmother passed, he got worse and ended up needing at-home care. He didn't want a stranger in his home, so that wasn't an option. My parents preached that it was punishment for all of his sins, so they wouldn't take care of him, and they were planning on putting him in a home. I decided to stay with him since it would just be easier. My job can be worked effectively at home, and he'd get care from someone who isn't a total stranger. In the time I took care of him, we filled the home with the love and laughter my grandmother brought to it. As my granddad got worse, not a single call. Not from my mom or dad or my brother. We were joking about it once and he said, maybe I should just give you Missy, the house's name, instead of your dad. You're just gonna give it to your brother anyways. He laughed after he said that, so I assumed he was joking. Fast forward, the worst happened. I was the one who found him, had to make the call. All of it. As much as I pushed away from my parents, I didn't want them to find out the news from a random person. The funeral was the first time I ever truly connected with my parents in years. We hugged and cried together and we were all vulnerable. But then it came time for the will. Now, it wasn't some telenovela with all the dramatics, but it was intense. The house that was supposed to be my dad's became mine, as well as many other things that my dad planned on giving to my brother. I was accused of manipulating my granddad into giving it to me, and my brother was just yelling. A week after, my brother came to the house in tears. He was begging me to give him the house since his was too small for his wife and baby. He argued that because it's just me and my husband and we don't want kids, I don't need it. I told him to leave and felt horrible. I felt like an asshole and so does my family. He's right, I don't need the house. My job pays me good money and I could easily just live somewhere else. On the other hand though, my granddad wouldn't want him or my dad to have it. I am at a loss here. Am I the asshole?
Am I the asshole for going on a hiking trip with my pregnant wife? Over the weekend, my wife and I went on a hiking trip with some of my friends. We've always been active people, but it kind of seems like my wife, who's 6 months pregnant, has turned into a couch potato in recent weeks. It's caused her to gain a bit of weight and become moody, so I figured some exercise would be good for her and me. Well, I thought I picked a pretty easy hike. It's a trail that's close to our house and not that long, about 3 miles out and back, but it can be a bit steep in places. She's done it before, so it couldn't have been too much of a surprise. Well, we were about 1/3 of the way done when my wife started huffing and puffing. My friend slowed down to accommodate her, so I decided to slow down too. After half a mile of huffing and puffing, my wife looked pretty bad. She got really pale and was hunched over on the side of the trail. I was sort of shocked to see her in this state. She had let herself go recently, but I didn't think she would lose her fitness this quickly. However, a few minutes later, she actually started to throw up, and it was at this point that we all decided to head back. I'm fully aware that she's going to deliver a baby in 3 months, but I can't help but think that she wouldn't have embarrassed me in front of my friends if she had kept up with her exercise routine. We both ate the same food at breakfast, and I never got sick, so that couldn't be it either. We got back to the parking lot, and I apologized for my wife's behavior to my friends. I thought I was out of earshot, but apparently my wife heard the whole thing. When I got back to the car, she went nuts. She told me that I was an idiot for thinking she could keep up at our normal pace, and that I was a grade A asshole for insinuating that my wife had thrown up on purpose. I listened to her rant at me before politely asking if she thought she would have felt so sick if she hadn't been a couch potato recently, but she refused to engage with me at all. I wanted it to dawn on her that she was at least partially to blame for this, but she refused to take any responsibility. This happened on Saturday, and even today has been really tense. It's as if she's holding a grudge against me, and I don't know how to get her to stop. She's making me really sad with this horrible treatment. Am I the asshole?
I found out my husband was having an affair, so I spent years perfecting my revenge. Story time. So it started off by finding out that my husband Steve had had an affair after 4 years of marriage. One night we were just sat on the sofa and I saw a text appear on his work phone, and it was from a woman called Amy. I was already a little bit suspicious at this point, so I decided to check his phone. And let me tell you, the texts I found should never be on anyone's work phone. They were like getting you fired level of inappropriate. It was graphic, okay? My mind then started to go to all the weird things that Steve had been doing recently. He'd walk out the room to answer a phone call or reply to a text. And because he's a doctor, he was claiming that this would break confidentiality. When he'd finished his evening shifts, he'd come home smelling of perfume. So I confronted him on it, and he said that it was just the patient's perfume that must have rubbed off in his clothes. But strangely, every single time it was the same perfume. He started getting phone calls at all times of the day to ask him to go in to cover 6 shifts. But these just so happened to be in the evening. I couldn't for the life of me think where I knew the name Amy from. A quick call to the hospital revealed that Amy was actually a fellow doctor. One day, one of my children left a book in Steve's car, and it was the perfect opportunity to go to the hospital to try and find it. So I headed to his department and I spoke to one of the nurses on the front desk. I made a joke about having work phones, and this nurse turned around and was like, "We don't have work phones. This hospital is way too cheap to give us work phones." And I was like, caught you out again. So with all of this information under my belt, I went to speak to a divorce lawyer, and the news that she gave me was horrible. We live in a no-fault state, which basically means that if we were to get divorced, it doesn't matter who did what, equal parts would get equal things. So Steve would get half of my money, even though I make more than him, and even though he was cheating on me. That's what I wanted to hear. So there was only one person I thought I could trust in this situation. He was a fellow teacher who works at my school called Dave. Dave had been married when he was 19, but he got the marriage annulled because his wife got herself pregnant by another person 6 months into the marriage. That is rough, Dave. So I told Dave what happened, and he said to me, "If you don't like the hand you've been dealt, just change the deck." And that changed my life. The only loophole I could find so that I would not have to pay any child support or get a bad deal in a divorce is if I was to make less money than Steve and become the primary caregiver. So I checked, and an admin job had come up at my husband's hospital. It was less hours and less pay, and I became 100% caregiver. So once all this was underway, I spoke to a lawyer again. Basically told me that even though I was making less, I needed Steve to make a lot more. And something happened that played into my plan very, very well. Steve came home from work and he was in a foul mood. His supervisor had told him that he was going to need to get a higher education because in years to come he was going to struggle to hold his place. So he needed to go and get a master's in something else to do with medicine. Steve was very, very reluctant in the start. I was like, "Listen, I can take care of the kids more often. I can cut my hours down. And you can have every evening to study or go to class," knowing full well that he would not study nor go to class in the evenings. He'd be going to see Amy. "We know your game, Steve." So I knew for a fact that it was going to take about 2 or 3 years for this to happen, so I lay in wait because my plan was nearly done. So circling back to Dave, me and Dave became so close at this time. He was my best friend. Dave would come and help me with the children while Steve was out and about with Amy, studying. So Dave and I started our own affair. Years go by. Steve finishes his degree. I speak to the lawyers again and we are able to get a little agreement going. I decided to have the divorce papers served on his birth, just, to really sprinkle it in. When he was served, I told him that I knew all about Amy, had done for years. And it actually worked out really well in the end. We got divorced, I got to keep the house, I got to keep all the stuff, and me and Dave are getting married next year. And Steve actually got fired because you're not supposed to have relationships within the same department.
Story time about when the evil old man who ran the Seven Supergirls YouTube channel body shamed me and called me ugly when I was like 14. If you don't know anything about me, I was on a kids YouTube channel called Seven Supergirls where the owner was a really strange old man who ended up going to jail. Do with that what you will. So on this channel we had sponsors and there were a bunch of different kids clothing brands and things like that. He was so insane and had this idea that he wanted us to all look 12 years old, that he would use the sponsors to control us, even though the sponsors did not really give a shit what we were doing, I don't think. So anytime we did something that he did not like, he would threaten us and tell us he was going to take away all of our money and all of our opportunities and make us fail. We were children, might I remind you. This one particular time that I'm going to talk about today, I was on a beach trip with my family in Florida and not thinking anything of it, and as any 14-year-old teenager in 2015 would have probably done, I was posting little photos from my beach vacation that I thought were cute on my Instagram. In one of these pictures I was wearing a swimsuit, shocker, at the beach. It felt cute and I wanted to show that I was having a little fun time at the beach. As we're sitting down at the beach after I posted that, my phone starts blowing up like a bunch of text messages saying I needed to call him immediately. For the record, we solely used Skype to communicate, so it was actually Skype messages, but it came through like a text, whatever. So I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm like, 1 second, and I go up to the beach house that we were staying at, and I go sit down in the room, and I go to call. And he always made us do a video call, which was weird in itself, but not the point. I get on this video call with him, and he is fucking livid. He starts going off on me. My 14-year-old self. Might I just drive that point one more time? My 14-year-old. Let me give you a visual of this man. Receding hairline, balding, sweaty, British, ugly and crepey and scary as hell, always wearing a blue button-up with sweat pit stains and his butt hanging out, and reeked of Parmesan cheese. So he answers on voice call like that, and I'm like, what's the matter? And he starts telling me that I need to delete all of my Instagram posts that I just made immediately. And I'm like, why? And I kid you not, this man looks me dead in the webcam eye and he says, you look too thin in them, and the sponsor has emailed me and told me that if you do not delete these pictures showing your body type, that they will not work with you anymore because they do not want to sponsor someone who looks sickly. I said, what? He said, you're too skinny, you need to take them down or you will lose all of your sponsorships and opportunities. I was like, what? Let me preface this. I was not struggling with body image issues. I was not struggling with anything. I have always just been built very thin. It's genetic. My parents are both that way, and I'm also very tall, which distributes my weight differently. I used to get comments about it all the time, but that's just how I'm built. So I wasn't struggling with any image issues, but imagine if I was, or if I was struggling with something. Like, imagine if I was struggling with something and you said that to me. It's fucked up either way, but... And the audacity of a 54-year-old man to say that to a 14-year-old girl, and I will tell you right now, the sponsor did not say that. He said that because he wanted to control me and make me feel down on myself, because that is what he did to all of us. And for the record, I don't want pity or anything. I'm chilling. I was 10 years ago. I don't care. You guys always feel really bad in the comments. Don't. I don't care. Didn't let it bother me that much, so... For context, if you don't know me, I was on a kid's YouTube channel called Seven Supergirls, and the man who ran the channel was a creepy old man who ended up going to prison. So that's if that helps at all. I told the story of him body shaming me in my last post, so go check that out if you didn't see it. Now we're gonna get to the time that he called me ugly. I don't exactly remember how this story starts. But all I remember is when I found out that he did this. Now, he did not do this to my face this time. The body shaming one was to my face, no shame. This one he tried to keep under wraps. I mentioned in my last video that we all solely communicated over Skype, and sometimes all the girls would just go on Skype calls together for fun. There was a point in time where I don't know how or why, but he started joining our Skype calls that we were just having for fun, like a bunch of 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. That's not weird or suspicious at all. At some point on one of these calls, we were having a conversation, and me and one of the other girls on the channel, who I'm not gonna name, jokingly asked him, which one of us do you think is prettier? I don't remember why. We were 15. And he refused to answer. He said he wasn't going to answer or compare us, and we were like, okay, whatever, haha. I get off the call, carry on with my day, living my life. Weeks go by. I can't remember if it was the specific girl who told me or one of the other girls who overheard it. But I heard from one of the girls that after I left the call, he did answer the question. And he said he didn't want to answer it while I was on the call. But he did not think that I was nearly as pretty as the other girl who asked him with me. What? Of course, I was befuddled. Not that I cared if he thought I was pretty or not, but what the why are you saying that about teenage? I know we asked him, but why would you answer? Why would you wait until I left the call and answer? You're weird. So I told my mom about this, and then she confronted him. One thing about him is when he got nervous, he would stutter a lot, which is a common thing when people get nervous. I remember listening into the specific call that she had with him, and he was stuttering like he was trying to win a stuttering contest. He was stressed. He was trying to explain himself, but there was literally no way to explain himself because someone had proof of him saying it. This old British man is like, well, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. And what did you mean? What did you mean? I'm glad he thought I was ugly. I thought he was ugly, so the feeling's mutual, buddy.
My grandfather did not like me, and his entire side of the family didn't really seem like they liked me either, and from the time I was a toddler, I was painfully aware of this. Once when I was an adult, my mother said to me, oh, my father just thought having you made my life a lot harder, as though that should clear things up for me. It didn't. My older sister was tan and skinny with brown hair, and she was really well behaved, and then I was this pale, chunky ginger baby who cried a lot, and I always wondered if maybe the contrast between us was just too much for them, because they adored my sister and they never liked me. So I knew they didn't like me, but it didn't stop me from trying to get them them to like me. So every time they'd come to visit, I would come up with like a drastic personality shift to try to get them to like the new version of me. So I do things like talk in a British accent for 3 days, or like once I pretended to be a vegetarian for their entire visit to look socially conscious, because my grandparents were big animal lovers, but I think that one actually made them dislike me more than ever. One time I spent their entire weekend visit furiously sketching ball gowns into a notepad, so I'd look like a budding fashion designer and maybe they'd want to follow my career or something. Once I spent an entire weekend doing Sudoku puzzles, so I'd look like an intellectual, but I was actually really bad at math, so I just was writing random numbers into the little squares, but they didn't care enough to check my work, so like that one was kind of a wash. So I'm like 12 years old, my grandparents are due to arrive for a visit at any moment, and I'm about to implement my newest plan. So I'd realized that every time they visited in the past, the second they pulled in the driveway, I would be so excited I would run out and greet them immediately. But my older sister, she hung back. She let the grandparents come to her. I made myself too available, and I was thinking like maybe this has been my problem the entire time. So my new plan is that the second they arrive, I'm gonna run to the basement and I'm gonna wait for someone to miss me. I'm gonna give them an opportunity to be like, oh my God, where's Kate? So I go to the basement and I can hear them come in and I can hear them all chatting, but like 40 minutes goes by and not a single person has informed another regarding my whereabouts. So I'm like, this might be a while. So I have a school project to do on George Bush, so I'm like, I may as well work on it now. So I fire up the family computer with a contemporary operating system, Windows 98, and, I wait for it to load, and then, I have to do a school project on the president, like what website should I go to? Obviously, whitehouse.com. So I type in whitehouse.com, and suddenly there's just boobs everywhere. Like, there's absolutely no George Bush. There's just, like, naked women everywhere. So, like, pop-ups are popping up faster than I can close them. I don't know what to do. I try to shut down the computer, but, like, I can't even get the pop-ups to stop long enough so I can shut the computer down. So in a moment of absolute panic, I run to the wall and I flip the breakers and I just turn off the power to the entire house. So I have a brief moment of relief when all the naked women disappear from the computer screen, but then I realize I'm at the scene of the crime and everyone's going to inevitably come downstairs to check the breaker box because the power's gone now. So I dive into a game closet and I hide there, and I hear my mother and my grandparents coming downstairs. My mother flips all the breakers back on and she's like, that's weird. And my grandfather comments on the new computer. He's a big computer guy, and I'm just hiding in the closet. And my mother says, I have to go upstairs. I have to check on my vegetarian lasagna in the oven. I have to make sure the oven turns back on. So she runs back upstairs, and my grandfather groans about the vegetarian lasagna, and my grandmother's like, oh, stop. And he goes, oh God, you don't think Kate's still pretending to be a vegetarian, do you? And they both just start laughing. And that was my rock bottom moment, because I was in a closet with a board game called Don't Wake Daddy stabbing me in the kidney, and they were laughing at me. Like, my vegetarianism was disingenuous, but they didn't even know that. And I was doing all this crazy stuff to try to get these people to like me, and they were literally never going to like me. So in that moment, I made my new personal motto, whatever, I'm cooler than these hoes anyway.
This video may end up saving someone's life, so if you have a teenager, a girlfriend, a mother, a sister, please share this video with them. Actually, share this with everybody, because this could happen to men too. I've been trying for a week to make this video, and every time I tried, I started to get really emotional and cry. So I'm going to try to get through this video and just share the information. On March 9th, just barely about a month ago, I was almost kidnapped, grabbed by a couple of men. And I'm going to share my story because it took me by surprise. It shocked me that I fell for it. So I'm going to ask you, if you've never shared one of my videos, and if please share this video. Please get it to millions of people, because when I spoke to the police about this, and they said that this happens every single day in every city. So what happened, and this was in broad daylight. It was in broad daylight. I was walking on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, and I was walking super fast, because when I'm walking from appointment to appointment, or even if I've just gone for a workout, I like to power walk. So, and when I walk, I have either music on or a book, or I'm working, I'm on a call. But I am still super aware of my surroundings, because things happen, and I have had things happen in the past, which maybe I'll share in another video, I don't know. But I'm on Sunset Boulevard, and it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's broad daylight. And all of a sudden, I hear, I actually just had my book on. I wasn't on the phone or loud music or anything. It was my book. This was why I heard her. To my left, I heard a woman's voice say, "Excuse me," sounding really sweet. And she kept saying, excuse me," and I was listening to my book. Now listen, when I was in my 30s, God, like, I don't know, 25, almost 30 years ago, I had taken self-defense classes. And I remember in the self-defense classes, this was one of the things that we learned. Never, ever, ever stop. Never, allow strangers to yell at you, but keep going, keep moving. So I heard this woman kept saying, excuse me. And, in the last few, I sometimes I feel like I'm being paranoid because I have had people like yell at me from cars. And sometimes it's women, and either I'm too busy or I'm on the phone and I can't stop. And then they like get angry with me, and they're like, "I was just going to ask for directions." That's all of a sudden, like, that's what's going through my head. I'm like, oh, it's a woman that needs help. She just probably needs directions. So, and I have a little bit of trouble with my eyesight. This is how it happened, but it could happen to anybody because just off guard. So I was on the sidewalk, and I get off the I step off of the sidewalk, and I go. I'm getting closer to the car to see what she needs. And as soon as I got close to the car, I realized that she was sitting in the back seat with the window open, and the passenger, whoever was in the front, a guy, opens his door up. The driver opens his door up. Two guys get out. And as soon as these two guys get out, I realize what is happening, and I take off. Thank God I was in athletic shoes. Thank God I was in sneakers, and I only had like my backpack with me, which was barely empty. There were my glasses and whatever. And I started to run. I ran like hell. I ran and ran and ran until I found a shop that I knew that I could get in that wasn't closed, and I ran into the shop, and there I felt safe. But I was so shaky. I was so upset. Thankfully, I'm sharing this. Please share this video, because this could happen to anyone. And I shouldn't say just a female. It could happen to a male. So please, man or woman, teenager or older woman, things are going to happen. And so if you're alone and you hear a woman's voice or anybody saying, don't get close to cars, don't get close to anybody, things are so dangerous sometimes. And we just don't realize how dangerous things can be. So, when I spoke to the police later, they said that this happens all the time, and that people who are looking to grab people, kidnap people, abduct people, that they use women because people trust women. So they say that this is exactly how it happens. They'll put the woman in the back seat, and the woman will yell out and try to get women to get close to the car. I was pretty lucky. I mean, thank God, I'm not pretty lucky. I was very lucky. I feel very grateful and very blessed. So please, share this with everybody. And hopefully, whoever is watching this video, if anybody yells from a car or from anywhere, don't stop. Don't stop. Keep going. In fact, if you hear someone yelling, start running.
I went on a first date with this guy, and he would not stop calling me his autistic queen. I met this man on Hinge, infamous, horrible Hinge, and I like to tell people before I go on a date with them that I have autism and ADHD, just to rip the band-aid off. I want to see if this person is ableist before I go out with them. I don't want to spend my time with someone that will not accept me for me, so that's why I tell people beforehand. And during text message, he was already texting me my autistic queen. I didn't really think anything of it because it wasn't like super intense, and it didn't feel that way through text, but I just thought it was kind of weird, but I was gonna let him just go along with it, right? So the day comes around, so we go to this healthy Italian food, really relatively fancy place, and he looks good, he looks like his pictures, so I didn't get catfished, and we meet each other for the first time at the restaurant. And when he was introducing himself to me, he called me his autistic queen. Why? I have no fucking idea why he did this in person. But anyways, I just looked at him weird, and then we kept walking into the restaurant and we sat down. The server comes around, then he introduces me to the server as his autistic queen. What's going on here? Why are you introducing me to the server as your autistic queen? First of all, I'm not your queen. I'm nothing to you. This is the first day. And why do you keep telling everyone that I have autism right now? In front of the whole restaurant, he keeps calling me this. I'm thinking he's gonna stop, right? Because this is still very early into the day. I'm thinking he's gonna stop calling me this bullshit. No, he keeps going, he doesn't stop. He keeps calling me all types of variation of autism. I don't know why he's doing this at this point. He started calling me his autistic baby, his autistic queen. Like, and he kept just coming up with variations of this just to call me autistic. I get it, I'm autistic, like I already know this. Like, why do you keep calling me this in front of everyone right now? So I confront him and I'm like, why do you keep calling me that? Like, can you just like call me by my name? Like, why? It feels like dehumanizing. I feel like you're putting me on display. Look at me, look at this little black autistic girl. Look at it, a Negro, that's autistic. Look, that's how I felt. That's how it felt to me. And I'm just like, it's dehumanizing. And it's insane that you actually keep calling me this in front of everyone. He's confused about why I'm mad. I'm confused about why the fuck he keeps calling me his autistic queen. And, you know, at the end of the day, I never went on a date with that man ever again, but I did search him up online because I didn't have his full name before. Turns out, dude was a full-ass fucking incel. He was posting the most egregious things on fucking Twitter, on X. I think I dodged a bullet on that one, but still, I had to fucking experience this man, this obscene man. I had to experience this obscene man, this fucking weirdo. Why is this my dating life?
So I've had alopecia for literally most of my life now. And today I'm going to tell you the worst experiences I've had with a medical health professionals. So unfortunately, it's actually quite mind-blowing, but I've had 2 doctor experiences that you really wouldn't think doctors should be saying things like this. So the first time was when I was very young. So my alopecia, like the first signs started when I was about 1.5 years old. And my mum took us to the doctors at around 2 years old. And at this point, my mum was just worried. She had tried a few things. She thought, oh, maybe my ponytail was just a little bit too tight or something like that. But nothing was really given a plausible explanation, so she decided to take me to the doctors. And that is exactly what any concerned parent would do. You'd go to the doctors for some reassurance, to find some answer. And you know the doctors that are just very dismissive of everything. Well, she was very much like she was just being a very fussy parent and worrying or complaining about nothing. But the doctor's words exactly were, oh, it's just baby alopecia, it'll go away. I could be totally wrong, but I've never heard of baby alopecia in the sense of because you're a baby, you get alopecia and just that's it, it'll go away. If he had have taken it a bit more seriously at that point, I am aware it would not have made a difference. But I do think just the way my mum was treated and just our genuine concerns were just shut down just like that. As a healthcare professional, I really feel like it could have been dealt with a lot more empathy. Okay, this next situation is honestly one of the worst things, and I don't even know how this doctor is still doctoring. So this time it was when I was around 15 or 16 year old, and this was at a time when I was really struggling for funding for wigs, and the only wig that I had was scratty old. And honestly at that age, not being able to have that comfort wig or wig that didn't look like a wig was honestly one of the most terrifying things. And even though I did go around without a wig on, it didn't make it any easier because I just knew I didn't have that comfort or that security blanket basically. And funding for wigs in the UK is very much a location thing. It depends on your location and whether they have enough funding. And then I remember at the time my funding had changed because it then went from government funding to specific doctor funding. And huge shout out to my mum because we had to fight for years just to get some funding. So when we were at the doctors, it was a time where we were trying to get an update or put forward for that specific funding. And this doctor was a little bit of an older guy, and he had started a little bit of male pattern baldness in his old age. And we were there trying to tell him how much we needed this new wig, how terrible my old wig was, the condition of it, and how it was really making us feel. And no joke, this doctor turned around to me and tried to compare his male pattern baldness situation to mine. And he thought it was appropriate to say, well, you see, I'm losing my hair and it's not that big of a deal. I don't really mind.
Like, you know, I'm so happy for you that you're in a really good place with your own male hair loss, but no way should that be used in a way to diminish the feelings of a 15-year-old girl. Especially as a doctor, someone who you go to for help. Like, honestly, very strange if you ask me. So yeah, that's exactly what it's like growing up with alopecia. Love that for me. Love you.